Oh, right from the outset, we started having internet problems. Welcome to the Saints Under the Dome podcast. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, and Bob couldn't make it tonight, so we've got my son in. God dang it. Matt Ulrich is in as a fill-in tonight. So, how you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing quite all right, doing very all right.
Yeah, I know. It wouldn't be a podcast, internet troubles. It was fine all afternoon. Everything else, as soon as this thing starts up, we start getting internet problems. All right, Matt, you haven't been on the show. You pop in and out. I see you in the chat and everything. But
hmm
what um, what I've been asking Bob basically is what this is pretty much the roster the Saints are going to bring into training camp. So, who do you think is going to be the breakout player? Who's the guy that the season kind of depends on, or guys that the season depends on? And who are the guys you think, this guy's not going to make it, or a lot of people want to think this guy's going to be an impact player. He probably won't be.
Yeah, I think one guy to kind of keep an eye on is probably going to be, of course, the sixth-round pick, A.T. Perry. A lot of people seem to kind of have him penned in a little to make the team, and I, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think he's going to make the team initially, just because so far, I mean, he's struggling making the tough catches, the contested catches, which is what Dennis Allen's really kind of paying attention to. And even with all these rumors um, with maybe Hunter Renfro coming to the Saints, we don't know what a trade situation is going to be like. Um, he might not make the team initially unless once the pads come on, he starts displaying more of what made him an attractive prospect.
Well, he's a six-round pick, so I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at a guy. I know he's projected to be a fourth rounder, but you're really looking at a guy who's got an uphill climb. Now, I did see he's been having a lot of problems trying to, catch the ball, trying to acclimate himself to the offense, the schedule, and everything else. This isn't really uncommon for a mini camp because if you remember, Marcus Colston showed up back in 2006 at the look, number 30. That is the Saints' first pick ever. Les Kelly, he was a total bust. Anyway, just this is 67 team that's behind me right now. The original expansion team.
Mm.
But anyway, A.T. Perry, even though he was projected to be a fourth round pick, he's playing like a sixth rounder. Marcus Colston, when he came in back in 2006, looked terrible in OTAs, looked terrible in minicamp, worked out, got himself in shape, and came in for training camp in a much better situation. So, much better condition. So he was able to make an impression to basically justify getting rid of Dante Stallworth. So, I mean, I'm not concerned about him yet, and I'm not really counting on him to make an impact. But you mentioned Hunter Renfro. I know you've been a big proponent um, to to be on the to the Saints. I'm sorry, I'm reading something as we're talking. Tigmeister, are you saying you're blocked on here, or are you blocked somewhere else? I'm sorry, I'm just seeing this about you being blocked. I just didn't know if there's anything I can fix for you. Um, anyway, what I was going to say was that you want Hunter Renfro on the Saints team. Why?
I think he's just a great fit for the team, and it gives a little more cushion if Michael Thomas can't play all play for most of the season. I don't think he's going to play all 17 games. I think that might be long gone by this point. I think it's more of
Okay.
I don't think he's going. I think it's more of can he at least play 12 games? Can he play 13? And I that's primarily why I want Hunter Renfro because if like I said, if Michael Thomas does miss the majority of the season again for whatever reason, you want to have better cushion, and I think Dennis Allen feels the same way.
Okay. I can see that. Well, why Hunter Renfro say over DeAndre Hopkins? Because Hopkins, you just have
Mhm.
to put a contract together. He's a free agent.
Yeah, I think because Hunter Renfro wouldn't really take away too many snaps from guys like Rashid Shaheed and Olave, because Renfro is a primary slot guy. While he can't line up outside if he needs to, you already have a position and a role for him to play, and that's going to be the slot guy to play on third down. Essentially, getting another Willie Snead or maybe even a Lance Moore per se on your team. Getting someone like Hopkins, he can play slot and you have some versatility along the lines, but he's primarily an outside wide receiver. He likes to line up along the boundary. He likes to primarily line up on the offensive left side. That's where
Hmm.
I've seen many of his big highlight plays, many of what he likes to take advantage. He likes to line up on the left side, and that's where a lot of you've seen a Olave line up right there, and even Michael Thomas also line up on also on the left side. So you have a bit of more shift and kind of juggling around to do with Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, so you have the X and the Z position, and the Y is the slot guy.
Hmm.
X is your primary receiver in a West Coast offense, so that's Michael Thomas's role. So you're basically looking for an X, and that's DeAndre Hopkins as an X player. Um, I always look at Hunter Renfro as somebody who can play the X, but he is more of a wide receiver. He is much better in the slot than he is outside. So if you were to get Renfro, and let's just say for the sake of argument, Thomas is hurt or misses a good portion of the season, Renfro is really not a good replacement for Thomas, other than you can play Renfro occasionally at the X, but you're going to have to move Olave to the X and have, um, or as the kids say, WR1, wide receiver one. He would end up playing that position, and you be putting Renfro in as the X, whereas as the Y. Z is a speed guy. That's Rashid Shaheed. That's where he's going to be for the most part. I just find it interesting that kind of thought process because with Hopkins, like you said, he's really not a slot receiver. You put him in as a slot only because you like the matchup you're going to get. Your best receiver against their third best cornerback. Um, but Hopkins is almost exclusively an X receiver now at this point of his career. So that's where you're talking about playing him all the time. So yes, he's more of a direct parallel to Michael Thomas, but Thomas can play the slot well. You can rotate him outside, inside. He just can't be the Z receiver. He's not the guy who's going to run deep. Um, so, that's just how I see it. Yeah, I saw that last week, Jerry. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all. And as always, I appreciate Saints Happy Hour. This is your trivia man right here. This is Bud Rich, the trivia man. What
I didn't
trivia
give
questions you give them
I
tonight?
didn't
You didn't
I
give
didn't
them
give
one?
him one. Nah, I've been slacking lately on trivia. I just haven't been focusing or really looking for something to kind of get them on.
Okay. All right. Well, they already know. We've already done this trivia question before. Who was this? Who was the team the Saints beat for their first win, and what year was it?
Yeah, it was the Eagles in '67, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the Philadelphia Eagles in '67.
Yeah, I
Walter
gave him that
Flea
question
Roberts.
already.
Yeah, Walter Flea Roberts had 3 touchdowns that day. That was a big game for him. So that'll pop
Yeah.
up in a minute. You'll see that in a minute.
Hmm.
They're going through the various highlights for the '67 season, so it's going to bounce all over the place as they're talking about various players. Um, So Michael Thomas did come back, and one of the things that Dennis Allen said afterwards is, we'd like to get at least 8 games out of him. I'm with you. I think if we can get 12 games, that's going to be a great season because I think Thomas, barring any other trades and barring any other movement in the team, Thomas is the key to this team being a playoff team or not. More so than almost any other player outside of Derek Carr. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was a big part last year. I mean, based on what Dennis Allen was talking about in his press at his end of season press conference, and I think
Mm-hmm.
there's still that expectation, but they want to have a bit of a bigger safety net than they had last year.
I mean, that's the thing. Olave, he's a nice piece. He's not the contested catch guy. We talked about that in previous episodes. Thomas is. Thomas isn't the burner. Thomas isn't the speed guy. But you can't win with just speed guys. You have to have the physical receiver who can move those chains, get those important first downs. You know, that Tampa game, people really rag on that as being like the game. They're like, that's it. I'm done with Dennis Allen because they lost that game by blowing the lead they had. And they couldn't get more points. One of the things I kept harping on was that they really didn't have the weapons to extend drives when they had to. They either had to try and pound the ball inside with Alvin Kamara or try and force one of the other receivers to be the physical guy inside. And you saw this in the Tampa game. That 3rd and 1 play, he tried to do a quick pass to Marquez Callaway. And to me, Callaway drops the ball, even though it was high. Callaway drops the ball. I don't think Thomas drops the ball in that situation. I think Thomas snags that thing. He's waiting for it. He can use his body to shield the defender out. And if he doesn't get the pass, at least draw the pass interference. I mean, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think with Thomas, he does make that catch, and I think he does convert that first down just because he's just too strong to really just bat the ball away. I mean, Callaway, he has some strength, but it's not at the same level. He can't really just snag a ball and bring it down.
I agree. I mean, Callaway's thing was it seems he made the difficult catches look easy, but the easy catches he seemed to drop a lot. Now, that wasn't an easy pass from the catch, but he's still like, oh, here's the Saints' first ever win right here. Saints Eagles. Get ready to introduce Jimmy Taylor from the Green Bay Packers, LSU guy, right there. But yeah, he was the star. The fans all loved him because he played at LSU and he won all those championships for the Packers. But it was Walter Flea Roberts, who is actually on Facebook, by the way. Walter Flea Roberts, who was the big hero that day against the Eagles. But anyway, I was going to say with Callaway couldn't make those big contested catches consistently what Thomas does. And I think, DeAndre Hopkins, Hunter Renfrow, those are the kind of guys that can make those other contested catches. I don't know if A.T. Perry can yet. He hasn't shown that he can. I don't believe Shaheed or Olave are going to be that guy. So if those guys aren't it, and if Thomas gets hurt, who do you see the Saints on the current roster being able to make the play?
I think perhaps Brian Edwards, the guy they signed in free agency, I think he might. He's shown some capability, but he does kind of fall in that Callaway kind of lack of consistency just because he's now on his 3rd team in 3 years because last year was on Atlanta and previous year he was with the Raiders.
Yeah, but Atlanta doesn't count because it's not a real NFL team.
Yeah,
anyway,
of course.
But what about the kid from the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Washington?
Yeah.
I don't know because he's coming off a pretty bad injury last year. He signed with Dallas last year, and he hurt his foot and was out for I think he was out for the entire season. And even so, he's not really much of a contested catch guy. He's a low key vertical threat that also has consistency problems. He's kind of a slower Devery Henderson, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it
He does,
does. It does
yeah.
because he looked like he was going to be the stud on that team, the
Hmm.
Steelers. I'm talking about his rookie season, and then he kind of fell off after that. He was never quite the same consistent player that the Steelers saw his rookie year. So, and
Yeah,
that's part of the reason why he has bounced around the league the way he has.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what about the kick return position? I've talked to Bob about this. Is there a guy that you like in particular to end up being the return guy this year?
I think it's probably going to be Shaheed, but I wouldn't be surprised if the kid we signed in the undrafted free agency, Malik Flowers, proves to be a solid option, especially if they want to give Shaheed more snaps at wide receiver and just have someone else be the returner.
I agree. I mean, and that's why I've been asking this question to everybody. Because I don't think that Shaheed is going to be a primary kick returner, only because he is going to be seeing so much action as a starting wide receiver. And that doesn't mean anything
Hmm.
because the Saints in the past have used starters on special teams and they've used starters to return kicks. I just can't see, let's say Shaheed gets a nice return, gets to midfield or so, and then okay, now you got to go on offense. We want to run a go route. I mean, you can't get Shaheed to run a go route right there. So,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be fair to him. So that's my concern with Shaheed being a
Hmm.
kick returner. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the consensus everyone has. Let's watch Flowers and see what he does. Um, do you see any dark horses making this team this year? I know we've been focusing mainly on receivers, but do you see any kind of dark horse player that I didn't expect this guy to make it, but I think he's a guy to watch. Essentially an undrafted son.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm taking a look. Um, I think one guy could be the defensive tackle from Ohio State, perhaps Jerron Cage. I think Malcolm Roach has a job right now, but it's his to lose. I think they do want another pass rusher, but they want to have more importantly a backup nose guard for Kalen Saunders because last year I think they only had like one nose guard and it was just Shy Tuttle and he would get gassed so easily and would eventually be a liability. Because right now you have
Hmm.
at least two, three techs. You have your first round pick for Z, and then you have Nathan Shepard. So if they can get a solid guy to kind of give Saunders a breather every now and then, keep him fresh, especially during the later portion of the game where things might get a little tricky, or if a team decides to adjust and want to run the ball more, I think Gerard Cage might be an interesting name to watch. And he, there's probably one more dark horse, and it might be a linebacker. I just gotta remember his name. I can't think of it for the life of me. It'll hit me at some point.
The linebacker from Tulane.
Uh, uh Not really Nick Anderson. I probably the kid from Vanderbilt, Anfree Ogery.
Okay,
That mi-
yeah.
I think he might
Okay.
be a low key option, depending on how many linebackers decide to keep on the roster.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, because definitely the linebacker position is pretty wide open. I can see them bringing in different linebackers. Uh, you know, this is the make or break year for Zach Bond So some think that Zach Barn has a potential to have a breakout season like Caden Ellis. Others are like, no, you've seen the best of Barn. He's not going to be a breakout player. Um, so who do you see maybe playing that third linebacker role? Because I know who Bob likes a lot, and I agree with him. I think that's the guy who's probably going to be the third linebacker on the team.
DeMarco
But
Jackson.
DeMarco Jackson, yes, the
Yeah.
kid from Appalachian State.
Uh,
Who do
Underhill's
you
been
see?
tweeting. I think it probably is going to be DeMarco just because I'm reading some of what Underhill has tweeted about Jackson. Apparently, he's looking really good at camp and looked much sharper in dropping back in coverage than initially shown. Because when you look at the tape on Jackson, he's shown very effective at blitzing, pretty good at run coverage, but pass coverage left some to be
Hmm.
desired. Another guy
Right.
I kind of want to keep an eye on is Nephew Sewell, who was an undrafted free agent last year. He didn't make the team initially, but was brought in late in the season. He played a little bit of special teams. I think once Pete Werner went down again, and I think he missed the rest of the season. And he's just a guy I just want to kind of keep tabs on and see if he's grown at all.
Yeah. I think Zach Bond. This is his make or break year, but I still think he's just going to be a special teams guy. I just don't expect anything big out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is interesting. Saints playing the Falcons to end the season. Um, First time the Saints and Falcons ever play each other. The Falcons are only in their second year, but the two teams are not in the same division. They would not be in the same division until 1970, when after the merger, because the Falcons were in what was known as the Coastal League back then. And what that meant was the teams that played the coast, Baltimore, Atlanta, the Rams, and San Francisco are all part of the Coastal League. So this is one of the reasons why the Saints ended up in the NFC West and why the Falcons ended up in the NFC West. The Baltimore Colts, as part of the agreement in the merger, because there were 16 teams in the NFL, 12 teams
I'm
in
gonna
the
take this in a
AFL.
different room real quick, so
Okay.
you're gonna see me
They had
walking.
All right, they had 12 teams in the AFL. As long as you don't pull a Dave and go to the bathroom, we're all good.
Oh no,
Um,
nothing like that. Just a front
yeah,
room.
but okay, there were 12 teams in the AFL. So three team. I'm sorry, there were 17 teams in the NFL and 12 teams in the AFL. So three NFL teams had to go over. Cleveland, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh all went over to the AFL. Um, so when Baltimore left, that left the NFC Coastal Division or NFL Coastal Division a team short. The Saints were in 67 and 68. I'm sorry, 67 and 69. They were in what was known as the Century Division. I think that's what it was, but it becomes the NFC East. But they were in a division with Dallas, with Washington, with St. Louis, with Philadelphia. And St. Louis wasn't in that division in 67. They were in 68 because the Saints got moved to the Capital Division in 68. So, yeah, that's why the NFC West had two teams from the South and two teams from the West, because it was the old Coastal Division of the NFL.
Mm.
I looked that up years ago because I was trying to figure out how that even happened, because the NFC North or the old NFC Central, that at least that made sense. It was the same four teams. It was Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay. That they're all right by each other. So
Yeah.
anyway, that being said, oh, and Cincinnati, Paul Brown's team, since he used to own the Browns, when Cleveland came over to the AFL, Paul Brown said, "I don't care where you put Cleveland, but they're going to be in the same division with us." because he wanted the Bengals to play the Browns twice a year, and it's no coincidence that team is called the Cincinnati Bengals because CB, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, we want the same logo. And in the 70s, when the Browns and the Bengals played each other, they wore the exact same uniforms. The only difference was the Bengals had Bengals written on the side of their helmet, no stripe, and the Browns had the stripe on the helmet, but no logo.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you look at the old '70s things, you can't tell which team is which, only by the names and the numbers of the players, and that was on purpose. That was on purpose.
Tape watching purposes?
Anyway, wait, what?
Was it for tape watching purposes
What's
where coaches might have to just guess on who that guy is?
No, that was Paul Brown basically saying, "This is my team, and that was my team." I'm reminding everybody that was my team. So it wasn't until 1980 that the Bengals finally changed uniforms and put the stripes on the helmets, and they looked less like the Cleveland Browns. But from
That's
1970 to or 1968, when the Bengals came into existence, to 1979, they were almost identical. Anyway, all right. So Michael Thomas came back today. Now we still haven't seen guys like Taysom Hill show up over there. I don't think Marshawn Lattimore has been at the OTAs. I know the guys that are rehabbing haven't been much at the OTAs. Is that a concern for you? Are you concerned these guys are not at these OTAs?
For the guys rehabbing, I'm only concerned if they're on the pup and they're on it much longer than they need to be. I mean, I want them to rehab. I want them to be ready for training camp. But I'd say a guy like Marshawn Lattimore, I'm not too concerned because I know he's going to be good, and I know he's not, letting his ego get to him and saying, "I want out of this team." So, for me, it depends on what some of these situations are, and if they got like anything going on off the field wise. As long as they're not getting into trouble, I think it's fine.
That guy right there. That's on my TV right now is the reason why the Saints lost for 19 years. Sorry, I just had to point that out. That was John Meekum, former Saints owner before Tom Benson bought the team. Anyway, Benson bought him in '85. But I always got to point that out to people because some people, I realize, like I was in high school when Bum Phillips was coaching the Saints. But I know a lot of people, they were either just born or they were toddlers when Bum Phillips was there. So they have no memory of John Meekum or, how the Saints were in the early 80s before, their first memories may be of Jim Moore's teams, not these John Meekum teams. So I always got to try and point that out to people. Like, okay, this is the reason why the team lost. They just made horrible draft picks. I mean, imagine an entire draft of Stanley Jean-Baptiste and Peyton Turners and guys that, that fourth round pick from 2018, that offensive lineman, guys like that who were never going to play. And that's what you would get. It's not until Bum Phillips 1981 they finally get their best ever draft class. After that, I mean, it's 1986. Meekum's gone. So one good draft class in 19 years. I mean, one really deep draft class in 19 years. So it's just, yeah, I know, and I know you remember Meekum. You were around, but yeah, for the rest of us, no. So speaking of those players, who do you see then as a guy? We've already talked a little bit about Zach Baum, but a guy who probably isn't going to make this team. Who do you see as maybe that guy?
I know I hopped on a little on what's his face, Malcolm Roach. I harped on him a little. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of them might be Landon Young and probably Throckmorton, just because some of the recent additions that the Saints have made on their offensive line, they
Throckmorton.
brought in,
Okay.
yeah, with Throckmorton. So you have a lot of guys that are already versatile. Not only you brought in Saldivari, who can apparently play all five positions if he's asked, but you got Lewis Kidd, who can line up both tackle and guard.
Mm-hmm.
You got Ruiz already that can play center and guard. You got Landon Young, who can play either tackle positions if asked. So if the Saints want to go completely versatile with their offensive line, because you already know Penning and Hurst are going to make it, and I think the most amount of offensive line they're going to keep is 9. So, so if the Saints want to have their offensive line be just completely versatile, like if one guy goes down on the starting lineup, like when Pete goes down, for example, they're not. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have just one guy who can just play just one position, which is just Throckmorton can only play guard. You can either
Mm-hmm.
throw in James Hurst, who can play guard. You can go ahead and throw in Saldivari, who can play guard, or maybe you throw in Lewis Kidd. I think they just want some versatility to where if there's an injury when an injury happens on an offensive line and it's happening for way longer than they need, they have guys that they can kind of interchange, and it allows them to be deeper than they probably already are.
Yeah. So that brings a good point up because this was a discussion I got in on Sunday, I think it was, on Twitter. And I want to get your thoughts on this too. There are some people who are really concerned about Penning. That first off, they feel like the Saints overdrafted him, that he wasn't
Yeah.
really worth a first round pick. And the second thing was that they are really worried that a guy who I'm sorry, a second, yeah, a guy who is probably too raw to really even have an impact this year because he was hurt so much last year. And if that's the case, that means Hurst is your left tackle, so you lose that swing tackle that you need. So who do you? I mean, first off, who do you see being the third tackle, and secondly, how do you feel about Penning? Do you feel confident in Penning, or are you concerned about Penning? How do you feel about him?
with Penn with the third tackle, I think it's probably I want it to be Hurst, but it might end
Mm-hmm.
up being someone like Landon Young or Storm Norton, who they signed to a 1-year deal. Because if Penning's not going, if Penning is gets hurt again, or he's still not completely 100% from that Liz Frank injury that he suffered in Week 17, then
Mm-hmm.
that's honestly a doomsday scenario. Because I feel like last year they wanted I think Penning was eventually going to be the starter for the Saints offensive line going into the season, and I think uh,
Mm-hmm.
Hurst was going to be the swing guy or the main backup. But when Penning went down, unfortunately, it kind of threw a wrench, and it made the team feel a little less athletic. Is the word I wanted to use. Penning, I don't think he's as raw as some people might think he is. He does need to work on technique and I think a bit of recognition, but his overall talent, like he has talent. He's not just some big athlete out there that you have to teach him how to, how to block, where to line up and all that. I think he has some of the basics down. It's just the more reps he gets, the more that he can go back and look at tape, be with Doug Marone and Jari Evans and point out what he's doing wrong. I think he can improve. And he showed that in preseason. He showed that in that Week 17 game. I found this tape this guy broke down of what he did against the Panthers, and there was plenty of good in that. I mean, even with his pass protection. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he's still a very good tackle, and I think he can. I think he has the starting job, and this is a run away with, pending he comes back completely healthy. He doesn't miss too much time because there is an opportunity he could start the season, start the training camp on the pup, and if that happens, now it's just a matter of when is he going to get activated, and when he gets activated off it, is he already run with the first string or is he with the second string?
Well, and to me, that's the two areas I'm most concerned about. I'm concerned about how fast does he recover from his injury, because
Hmm.
I do think he was worth a first round pick. I think he was a first
Yeah,
round talent. One of the things that gets de emphasized by a lot of Saints fans for whatever reason is the impact the Senior Bowl has on the Saints drafting. In 2022, Penning was just throwing top draft picks around like rag dolls.
yeah,
He was dominating. He was one of the best play, and they talk about practice and game, and that's why they made the decision to draft him. That's why they made the decision not to sign Teron Armstead, uh, uh, because they felt that Penning had a greater upside than Armstead. Okay, and we're back. But Armstead's a freak because Armstead has tremendous athleticism and tremendous speed for an offensive lineman. He just can't stay healthy. Um,
yeah.
that's the only knock on Armstead. And I think
Hmm.
if they saw in Penning that same athleticism, maybe not the same skill level at this point, but they liked that he throws people around. And he better fits what Dennis Allen wants to build, which is obviously a power running game. He wants a power left tackle. I'm going to run behind you. I need you to clear the way, get these guys, just beat up on people so my running backs can break to the outside and run along outside of the numbers and get big yardage. And I think that's what they like about Penning. So I am not concerned about Penning being able to play the position and play the position well. I'm concerned about his health.
Yeah,
Um,
because I'm going back into the that draft and just taking a look at some of these guys. I don't see another left tackle in this draft. So instead of hoping that maybe uh maybe James Hurst can do well the entire season, now you just have this big question. Because let's say you don't retain Armstead, but you just have James Hurst and whoever else. There's not really another tackle prospect. I mean, you have a ton of right tackle prospects, but Penning was honestly the last real true left tackle prospect. And even if you didn't pull up that trade with the Eagles, let's say the Eagles got their wish and they traded for Russell Wilson because that was a story that leaked over the weekend. And we couldn't pull off that trade where we had both pick 16 and 19 and eventually traded up. I think
mm-hmm.
if we did if we didn't get Penning, I think what pick we would have had, we would have drafted a tackle anyway. We would have gotten probably the kid from Ohio State, Paris Johnson. So now you have a rookie that you don't know how well he's going to do. And I think tackles are still
Well,
you're still back in the same position where tackles a question.
yeah. I mean, first off, I don't think Penny makes it to the second round. I just don't.
Oh no,
Because
absolutely not.
too many other teams like so he is a first round draft pick. The only problem you had is do you take a risk on somebody that raw? But if you see the upside and you look at a guy like I know it's a totally different position, but you look at a guy like Josh Allen who did not look that good initially coming into the league, but now he's
Hmm.
probably arguably one of the top three quarterbacks in the AFC. So that's what you're hoping for. It's not growth, but you're hoping to get a stud left tackle, maybe a Kyle Turley type of tackle um, that can be your bookend for the next 10 years. And
Yeah.
that's all you can ask for. Um, so, yeah,
Or
that's my big
I,
concern.
I did want to add maybe you could probably get a guy like Colton Miller. So the Raiders Colton Miller because when he got drafted out of UCLA his first year, he was awful, like bottom of the barrel because he wasn't run blocking well and he was an absolute liability at tackle in his rookie year. Like if he was the Saint, he would have been chased out of here with torches and pitchforks. But he started to improve. He started to better training, and now he's being listed as a top 10 tackle and even got a 9-second contract with the Raiders. So I kind of see him in that same set, but honestly, I think he's better
Yeah.
than Colton Miller.
Well, I think he is too. I think his learning curve is not what people make it out to be. I think he's a lot further along than what people are projecting. I just think his problem is he needs to be out there, and he needs to be out there every snap so he can learn to play at the speed of the NFL. Coming from Northern Iowa, that's a concern. But, I just feel like the difference between Northern Iowa and a major college program isn't quite the gap we make it out to be anymore, because these guys are getting much better coaching at that level than they were, say, even 20 years ago. The former coach for UL is now the head coach of Florida. And thanks to the transfer portal, you've got players now changing and coming over to these major college programs from these smaller schools, and still showing that it's not too big for them.
Yeah, like even
The only
Osiris
time I
Torrance.
really get concerned about.
I'm saying like
Yeah,
Osiris Torrance.
yeah,
He
he was
used
a
to be
top.
at UL, and then he went to Florida, and he saw his great rise in his draft grade, and he even went against Jalen Carter and held his own.
Yeah, exactly. He went in the second round. He was projected to be a first round pick, and he went in the
Yeah,
second
I think a
round.
lot of people were just worried about
And that's the
his
other thing you
weight.
kind of have to look at. You sit there and say, well, okay, well, a lot of people worried about his what?
Weight, because he weighed
His
like
temperament.
350
Oh,
pounds.
wait. Oh, yeah. I think the biggest fear they had about Penning was his temperament too. That he was going to draw a lot of
Yeah.
fouls, a lot of flags, because he was so physical and nasty, and he wanted to throw people around and things like that. But it's not like his teammates didn't like him, and it's not
Yeah.
like he took dirty shots or cheap shots. Torrance went in the fourth round.
No, he did
Wow,
not go
I
in the
didn't
fourth
realize he
round.
went that late.
He went late second round.
Okay, I thought so. Because
Yeah.
I was in a couple of chats during the draft, and I even sat in on Bob's show, late third.
No, he did
Maybe
not
you're
go.
right.
He
I have
went
to go
late
back and
second.
look. I don't.
He went second round.
Okay. Anyway, we were talking. We were just going through, and we were talking about how the draft was falling really to the Saints' benefit. And I kind of threw out prospects. I said, you probably could get this guy now. You could probably get this guy, because this past draft was a lot deeper than I feel the 2022 draft was. I think the 2022 draft was a lot. If you were looking for certain players at certain positions, you were going to run out of them early in the first round and early in the second round. So, like offensive linemen, I felt like the quality offensive linemen were not going to fall into the second round. I think in this draft, quality offensive linemen were falling as low as the third and fourth round, which is why the Saints were able to get so many good players at so many positions. Real quick now, let's talk about running backs. And I'm only bringing this up because story came out this past week. I think it was Monday, in fact. Marcus May's court date has now been pushed to during training camp. We already know about Alvin Kamara's court date is supposed to be going on during training camp.
Yeah.
If it gets pushed into next season, or during the season, the court date and stuff for Kamara, that also, again, makes it harder for the commissioner to suspend him, because he's not going to suspend Kamara until the legal process has gone completely through. what does that say about both the running back we picked up from Detroit, Williams, and also the kid we drafted, Miller, this past year? Do you think that they are going to get plenty of opportunities regardless of Alvin Kamara's position or situation?
I think Williams has a set role regardless of Kamara's suspension. He's going to be the 1 yard pickup guy, the red zone guy. He's got a role set. Now, Kendre Miller's role is going to be dependent on Kamara's legal situation because let's say it does get solved and all that, and Goodell decides to lay down a suspension hammer
Mm-hmm.
at whatever point. I think uh, Kendre Miller's stats are going to vary based on the, the game suspended. Like if let's say it's similar to like the Ezekiel Elliott situation back in 2017, where his situation got handled after the bye week, and Goodell laid down suspension hammer and suspended for 6 games. I think that's where a lot of things are going to change for Miller because he might. I think if it gets pushed off to next year in 2024, Miller's going to essentially be the fresh legs back. He's going to be the guy that's going to give both Williams and Kamara a break where it's time to wrap up the game, run the ball, run the clock. That Mike Bell, that Mark Ingram when Pierre Thomas and Darren Sproles were on the team. Just finish up the game. Let's go home and prepare for next week.
Well, Mike Bell was certainly the person I was thinking of when you said
Yeah.
that because I think he does have a role. He is the Mike Bell kind of player right now.
But yeah, and I do want to
But
add one more thing.
mhm,
So there is a role right now that is wide open for a nice position battle that I forgot to talk about, and that is special teams running back. Because keep in mind, uh, the Saints did not resign Dwayne Washington; he's still a free agent. And
mhm,
right now, behind Miller, you have two undrafted free agents. You have Kellis Merriweather and Shadadrick Thompson, and also everyone's favorite local boy, Kirk Merritt, is starting to get snaps at running back. So there,
mhm.
so right now, running back 4 is up for grabs, and that's going to be your special teams gunner back. So that's another
I
position
relate
to
to
keep an
this
eye out.
guy. This guy and I have a lot in common. The one, I'm sorry, I just wanted to point him out because him doing
Yeah,
this and screaming like that, how can you let that happen? Yeah,
yeah.
that was me in a lot of Saints games, especially during this era. Anyway, well, it's funny you mentioned Kurt Merritt because Kurt Merritt was one of my guys that I said is going to be a guy to watch.
Mm-hmm.
He can't be drafted as an undrafted. I mean, as a undrafted free agent son, because his year was last year. He's not a rookie this year, but I think
Yeah.
he is a guy to watch. If Trey Flowers struggled, not Trey Flowers, Malik Flowers. Don't ask me where that came from. If Malik Flowers struggles as a kick returner, watch Merritt during the preseason and see how he does returning kicks and handling punts
Yeah.
because I think
Trey
that's
Flowers is a corner. He's a
yes,
cor-
yeah,
he's a corner. I think he played for Seattle, but I think he went to San Francisco now.
yeah. Okay, so but I mean that's the guy to watch
Yeah.
because I think they're looking at him as being that kind of guy and they want to use him more as a running back but as a pass catching running back and a special teams kind of running back. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think you need to watch.
I wonder if
Um,
Vino Benjamin can also kick return.
well, a lot of people have been talking about Eno Benjamin
Or as
as
Ralph
an
likes to call him, Emo Phillips.
Emo Phillips.
Yeah.
Great, great. Eno Benjamin is somebody to watch if Kamara gets suspended early in the season, and I'm talking about if the hammer comes down in preseason and he says, look, he's going to miss the first 6 to 8 games of the season. That's when you'll see a lot of Eno Benjamin come in and see if he can be the guy that Miller's got to beat out. The interesting thing about Miller is I feel like Miller talks and thinks like a guy who wants to be the man, the bell cow in this offense. And that is really exciting to me because here he's a guy I can see eventually, if he can do all the things, eventually being the guy who is like your number one, and then Kamara could become your number two, and now Jamal Williams is the guy who is the Mike Bell short yardage guy, alternate guy, um, that comes in, and that would be an interesting situation if that happens. I don't think it'll happen this year, but I think it's something to watch next year.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I kind of agree with it a bit. A bit. I think Miller, unless Miller has like Alvin Kamara 2017 preseason, where the moment he touches the ball, he just electrifies everyone. Goes, yep. Stop giving him snaps. We've seen enough. Let's give him the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I got the 80. That's the 87 highlight
Mm-hmm.
behind me now. And they just showed Ruben Mays, and that's essentially what happened. Ruben Mays came in. Dalton Hilliard was actually supposed to be the guy that was going to be the primary ball carrier in 87, 86, 87. But Ruben Mays basically took the job. Now Hilliard got it back because Mays started getting hurt, but Hilliard could do a little bit more than Mays could because Hilliard could run inside. But yeah, Hilliard was the second round pick. Third round pick was Ruben Mays. In fact, the third round of the 86 draft is a magical class because it's Ruben Mays, Pat Swilling, and Barry Word, who ended up being a good running back in Kansas City. Um, he had a drug problem when he was with the Saints. He got cleaned up and ended up going to Kansas City. But Barry Ward was a good power back for Kansas City. He was drafted to be a fullback, and he lost out to Buford Jordan because of his drug problems. So that's something to watch. Now, Jamal Williams, do you just see him just being a short yardage guy? You don't see him in the mix at all as getting more carries?
No, I think he'll get more carries, even more touches, because when back when he was with Green Bay, he actually did get involved in the passing game, not just as a blocker, but also as a pass catcher, because he was pretty good. I would say
Mm-hmm.
not on the same level as like Mark Ingram. Well, I wouldn't say the same level as like say Travarius Cadet or Alvin Kamara, where he's primarily a wide receiver. But he can definitely get some pass catchers. I would say like kind of 2000s Deuce McAllister, where he can get you 30 to 40. He can definitely get some yards after, maybe receiving touchdown every now and then. Because going back and looking at some of his Green Bay tape, he's done pretty well with the passing game, and they trusted him, and that's with both Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur.
Because to me, I feel, and Calvin, you're right. If all three are advertised, you don't change your offense, and you're not really dictating what you're going to do, because they can play inside. All of them can play inside or outside. My thing is Miller has to show he is ready to go from the beginning. That he doesn't have a learning curve, and I think Jamal Williams has to show that he can do blitz pickup. He can get the tough yardage inside, and for God's sake, protect the football. Because
Yeah.
to me, the only concern I have about any of the running backs is being able to protect the football. You've got to protect
Mm-hmm.
the football. If you can't protect the football, you do no good. You're no good out there. Um, yeah, you won't be. Yeah, you won't be telling the defense what you're going to run offensively. Um, Derek Carr. Let's talk a little about Derek Carr because we really haven't talked much about him.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel about Derek Carr? Are you excited about him? Do you feel like uh, fans have maybe unrealistic expectations? How do you feel about Derek Carr?
I like him. I'm very excited about him because he's a good quarterback. I know everyone who's ever talked about Derek Carr talks about how he doesn't have a defense. Well, he never really had a good team, good team to be built around him. Like he's only had two times where he's had a really good number one wide receiver, and that was when they drafted Amari Cooper back in 2015, and he developed a really good connection with
Mm-hmm.
him. And last year with Devontae Adams, for the most part, he's had of course Hunter Renfro, but also he had Antonio Brown for training camp until he wind his way out, and he did get out. Then he just had Darren Waller
Mm-hmm.
until he kept getting hurt. I mean, you look at the Raiders team being built, not just their defense, but even their offense. You you just saw that they couldn't build anything around him. That's why some of his stats are a lot lower than you think it is. I mean, I know we're not. I don't want to say his name, but the guy we're all thinking of when he talks about our second QB and talks about how bad he's done at Tampa. You still look at those Tampa offenses. Even his last year, he had a great wide receiver core. I mean, he had a okay offensive line, and he had pretty good. He had pretty good support. It just came down to him and just his ability to have a bunch of turnovers. With Derek Carr, it's more of, just not a good team built.
Well, I know we're talking. You're talking about you're talking about Jameis Winston,
Mm-hmm.
and there were a lot of interceptions that you were just like, what the hell were you thinking when you threw that ball? My thing about Carr is I feel confident in him because I feel like he is a guy who can execute the offense consistently. And I know that was a problem in Oakland slash Las Vegas when he was there. But
Mm-hmm.
he also had a revolving door of coaches, coordinators, and so forth. I'm just talking mainly about when it was John Gruden as his head coach, and he had a solid offensive core with Amari Cooper and stuff,
Yeah.
and he had Josh Jacobs running the football. When he wasn't asked to take the team and put it on his back and will this team to win, I felt like he just was consistently running the show and keeping the Raiders in contention to win a game. The problem was their defense was so bad that he felt like he had to make the play every possession because kind of like the 2015 Saints defense is so bad, you know, a three and out is essentially a punt. If you don't score on this drive, it's essentially a punt. You're not. It's like a three and out. You're not getting. You have to score every time you touch the ball because your
Yeah.
defense can't stop anybody. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that's when Carr got out of his element and was carrying the team. That doesn't mean he has to be just purely a game manager. It just means that he needs to not feel like he's got to be the hero. And I think he
Yeah.
can do that with the players that he has around him.
Yeah. And I think Carr is also a very efficient quarterback because Warren Sharp on Twitter, who does a lot of analytics, but he's not with like PFF or any major analytic network. He recently released today how each quarterback's efficiency passer rating or efficiency passing per attempt on third downs,
Mm-hmm.
and Carr was ranked seventh at at it versus someone like Andy Dalton, who was I think ranked 22nd. So I found that to be
Well,
a
and
little interesting.
man, I was going to say that's why we started the show talking about the receiving core because Michael Thomas, I feel, is critical to this team. At this point, he is critical because that is how you take the pressure off a card. Just get the ball in Michael Thomas's hands; he'll make good things happen. Um,
Hmm.
and that's why I was asking about Hunter Renfro and DeAndre Hopkins because if for some reason you don't feel confident that you can get Thomas for if not half the majority of this season, then you do need to make that trade because you do need to have a guy that you feel confident that you can throw to when defensive backs are all over him, like an Eric Martin, and still catch the ball. And that's what you had with Michael Thomas. That's what you had. Breeze had that with Marcus Colston. I feel like, he doesn't have that right now with Olave and Rashid Shaheed. That's not a knock on those guys. But when you have to convert that third down and it's a passing situation or you have the run pass option, you've got to be able to throw it to a guy that is going to come down with this ball. And I think that's my concern, because if we don't have that guy, then Carr is going to have to find that guy out of his receiving core, and that's where he can get into trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with Derek Carr, I think he'll do fine. I don't want to be overly optimistic, but I can see some stats similar to where he performed in his 2016 level, his third year in the NFL, where he was close to being an MVP candidate, and he led the Raiders. Well, they went 12-4, but as a starting quarterback, he went 12-3 because in Week 16 he broke his fibula and wasn't able to play in preseason.
When playing the postseason, the Raiders lost. Yeah, I forgot.
To Brock Osweiler.
Yes, I know, because he had that. They had I can't remember the quarterback's name.
Connor Cook.
14. Was it Connor Cook?
It was Connor Cook, because originally it was going to be Matt McGloin, but he got hurt in Week 17.
That's who I was thinking of. Matt McGloin was supposed to be the guy who was going to start, and he got hurt.
Yep,
so,
and so they had to start Connor Cook against a really good in-prime Houston defense that had J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Jonathan Joseph, who still had some legs on his rim, Whitney Marsalis. I think they have Brian Cushing, and they have second-year Bernard McKinney. Like, Houston defenses were good in the 2010s until all of them got hurt.
Who was the head coach back then?
It was Bill O'Brien. Kubiak was already fired. Kubiak was fired after Kubiak got fired after 2014. It was Bill O'Brien.
Okay.
Because Kubiak was with the Broncos in 2015 when they won a Super Bowl.
That's right. Yeah. So you had Bill O'Brien, the hack. I got you. Okay. All right. All right. So that's my only concern about Carr. We talked a little bit about the defense. We talked about the linebacker, and I think DeMarco Jackson. I feel like I agree with Bob Rose. I think DeMarco Jackson is probably going to be a third linebacker. If he's not, that's when they're going to start looking outside the building for a guy. Because I don't think it's going to be Zach Bond. Defensive line. What is your biggest concern along the defensive line? I know a lot of people want Frank Carr to come to the Saints.
Frank Clark.
Frank Clark. I'm sorry. I said Frank Carr. I'm sorry. Frank Clark.
Yeah, he's not the fourth Carr brother. No. I guess my big concern is going to be how that interior is going to line up and how many first team snaps Bresee is going to get, because according to Jeff Nowick, he did get some first team snaps in minicamp, which is promising. I want to see that happen. I want to see him get more first team snaps as camp goes along. Edge rusher, I think it's going to be fine. I think Granderson is good enough to hold down the fort and even be good competition for guys like Isaiah Foskey, or if Peyton Turner decides to hone in whatever talent the Saints saw in him to try and beat him out. I mean, that's just hoping. But interior, to me, is going to be the big concern. I want to see how Saunders, Shepard, Bresee, I want to see how those three guys are peculiar and how it's all going to look.
Well, and that was going to be one of my other questions. So that's why I'm not really all pumped up about Frank Clark, and it's Clark. I'm not that concerned about Frank Clark because I don't think pass rush is going to be the problem. I think it's the interior defensive line where we have to be concerned. And my biggest concern is nose tackle, the zero technique guy, because I think Brzee can play the three technique. I think you've got a lot of guys who can play the three technique. It's the guys that can play the zero technique, your run stuffer. That's my concern right now, because if the Saints can't stop the run or have trouble stopping the run, that's going to be a huge problem for this defense, because this defense is built on stopping the run and making a quarterback beat you. And they feel like their secondary and their linebackers have the speed to cover and make the plays that they need to make and get the sacks, because they've got a lot of pass rushers and a lot of guys that can pass rush.
And there's only one guy I see that's still available to free agent that's worth getting after for run defense purposes, and that would be Shelby Harris. I think he'd be solid enough to plug in, and I think he would do well enough. But otherwise, I don't want Ndamukong Suh. I don't want maybe Michael Brockers, maybe, but it gets very, very slim pickings.
Yeah, I know. So, do you think that Peyton Turner has a place maybe inside?
I don't know. I think let's see if he doesn't start off on the pub. Let's see if he actually is there in the beginning of training camp. I want to see him. I want to see what he does first and foremost. If he's actually developed in any sort of fashion, because right now he's on a chopping block, regardless of where they line him up.
I was just looking for it. Because we're talking about pass rushers, and Foskey is the only Saints player from the draft class who's not signed yet. Someone just agreed to a contract.
You talking about Derek Carr for the Seattle?
Okay, it is a Seattle pick, but they kept talking about Zach Charbonnet.
Okay.
So where was he picked?
Charbonnet or Hall?
Now. Hull, the one who's just
37
agreed to a deal.
37.
37. Okay, and Foskey is where?
40.
Okay, good. So he's setting the parameters, and I think he agreed to 18 million or something like that.
Yeah, it's really coming down to
showing up anywhere.
Yeah, I'll pull up Derek.
I know it's guaranteed money. Right now.
Let's see.
It's frustrating because I can't find a reliable source and I'm typing in every possible.
Look up Aaron Wilson.
Okay.
Because you're trying to look up his contract details, right?
They keep taking me to. Yeah, they keep taking me to Zach Charbonnet and the selection of Zach Charbonnet, and I'm like, I don't need this. I want to know.
Yeah, go to Twitter and look up Aaron Wilson, because he always tweets about the contract details.
Okay, yeah, because I'm Googling right now and I can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just retweeted them on Twitter if you want to take a look at it.
It must be. It must. Yeah, second round draft. I'm looking at it right now. Second rounder Derek Carr, we paid $3.08 million of his $3.629 million signing bonus, 85% prior to training camp. So that kind of sets the parameters for Foskey. So I expect Foskey to be signed probably in the next week or so.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even right before,
Mandatory,
the mandatory minicamp.
because yeah,
So
mandatory
that's
starts
good.
next week.
Yes, yes, it's next weekend. So okay, all right, good,
Well,
good. Yeah,
exactly
he
next
works.
week. It starts on the 13th and ends on the 15th.
Oh, I thought it was over the weekend. Okay, no
Nope.
problem.
I remember from what John Hendricks tweeted. It's from the 13th to the 15th.
Yeah, so 85% of his contract is going to be guaranteed is going to be paid to him prior to training camp.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting because I know Foskey was looking for more guaranteed money, more money up front, and that's why he hadn't signed his deal yet. The structure is one thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't been paying attention to these questions coming up. It's Meacham. It's a Meacham jersey I got on right now. I don't have an Everett jersey. Uh, and I know my son's a big fan of 17. I know he'd like to get a Kilmer jersey. Um, I really wish they would make affordable throwbacks because and more throwbacks than what they do because there's quite a few, or at least let me pick my own numbers and I put my names on the back of them because I could come up with some good ones. Because I'd love to get a Wes Chandler jersey. I'd love to get a Chuck Muncie, Tony Galbraith. I'd love to get all those numbers and jerseys. So yeah, this is Meacham. Um,
Hmm.
how healthy you think this offensive line is going to be? Because that's a good question. I mean, we know Pete is going to get hurt. It's a question of when, not if.
Yeah.
Um, we talked a lot about Penning. So let's look at the other side. And McCoy and
Ram.
Ramchek, they've had they've had their injury problems. Ramchek doesn't practice on Wednesdays during the season, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because he's got a knee problem that's degenerative. That's going to shorten his career. Um, and Ruiz, he missed. He had a good season until he got hurt, and then he missed the second half of the season.
Yep.
Um,
With a Liz
so
Frank.
that's a lot of question marks. How healthy do you expect this offensive line to be? Yeah. How healthy do you
Yeah.
expect this offensive line to be?
I think the starting five he might have on week one probably might not be the starting five we'll have by the end of the season. I expect quite a few shifts because 2 years in a row, Eric McCoy has had that exact same calf injury and it knocked him out for 6 games. So if,
Mm-hmm.
if he gets hurt again, you might as well just pen in McCoy's going to miss 6 games, and you got you got to hope that Ruiz doesn't miss any games while what's McCoy's hurt, because otherwise center becomes a huge concern, and it also can impact I'm sorry, not McCoy's contract, Ruiz's contract, because you don't know if the Saints initially were going to try and resign him, but if McCoy misses yet another 6 games due to the same calf injury, now you have to look at Ruiz going, hey, listen, we know McCoy's going to miss 6 games again. Should we give Ruiz another contract, a good second contract?
Well, and that's the interesting thing because they had the option of picking up his
Mm-hmm.
fifth year, and they chose not to. So it tells you what they think of Ruiz. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know how to. I don't know what the health this offensive line is going to be. Um, a lot of those guys aren't even participating in the OTAs because they're in rehab. Penning is in rehab. Pete's in rehab. I think Ruiz is still in rehab. So and Ramchek's not even there. So it's going to be dicey. I don't expect those guys to get many snaps, if any. Maybe Penning will get the bulk of them, but I don't expect to see Ramchek out there at all during the preseason. I doubt Pete will be out there very much. Ruiz may be out there some, depending on how if he passes his physical and if he is good to go from the beginning of training camp. But it's a huge question mark because 17 games, that's a long season.
Hmm.
and I know they're going to get at least one injury, if not two. I don't know how many injuries this offensive line can take because it depends on who gets hurt. If the tackles get hurt and miss time, we're in big trouble. If the
Yeah.
interior gets hurt and misses time, I'm not as concerned because I think the kid from Old Dominion probably can slide in. I think Hurst can come in. You can do things inside that you have the option or you have the ability to survive that. I don't think you have enough tackles, starting quality tackles, to survive Penny being out any length of time, and certainly Ramchek being out any length of
Yeah.
time.
I don't think you can handle too many games where you have Storm Norton or Landon Young having to play any sort of significant starting time.
Landon Young terrifies me when he comes out there because I thought he looked terrible in the Carolina game. Um,
Yeah.
I don't feel good about seeing Landon Young out there at all.
Hmm.
Um, Real quick to wrap this up, because we've been going through all the positions. The only thing we haven't talked about is secondary.
Yeah.
Secondary to me seems like the strength of the team.
Hmm.
And I know there's a lot of people who have talked about Adebo as being trade bait to send to the Raiders for Renfro. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
I think you need to keep the strength of this team. You need 4 to 5 corners out there. Um,
Yeah.
how do you see the secondary playing out?
I think the secondary is going to be fine. I'm just hoping Marcus May doesn't get suspended because I know it's not a criminal case. He is dealing with a civil case, but who knows with Goodell and with the Saints? Maybe he might say, you know what? You get suspension hammer too for something you did 2 years ago.
Well, it would be a short suspension. I can't see it being a very long one. Um,
Yeah, I can see maybe
but
2 games, but still.
but okay. So if Marcus May does get suspended, looking at the safeties you've got, I really like this kid that they drafted from Minnesota,
Yeah.
Jordan
Howden.
Howden. I think he has a really good shot of competing for a starting job if that happens. Then there's Smoke Monday, who we didn't get to see very much of, obviously, because he got
Hmm.
hurt. Um, but, I mean, outside of that, who else do you like in the safety position?
Lonnie Johnson, the kid we signed from Houston, because he can play both safety and slot. I want to see first of all what is going to be his primary role. Is he going to be is he going to be basically a slot corner, or is he going to kick out the safety a little more? I want to see what his role is going to be with the team because I'm very interested to see how he's going to do. I think he can be a kind of that unsung hero in the secondary where he kind of turns the tide on certain plays. He's kind of like that Manti Te'o or just that player that you kind of brought in on a small deal, but he really stepped up and made a couple big plays that helped save your season.
Well, you kind of saw that last year with the kid from Kansas City that we had. We got on a 1 year deal.
Sorensen.
I mean, he had 2 interceptions.
Hmm.
So I mean, it was. I just feel like you've got a good opportunity here to really have an athletic, aggressive secondary. It's just a question of can they get turnovers. Um,
Yeah.
I think Alonde Taylor is going to end up being the starting cornerback outside opposite of Marshawn Lattimore because
Hmm.
I think they want to see if Taylor can play to the level that suddenly now Lattimore may be expendable. And I'm just throwing it out there only because
Yeah.
of contracts, not because I think we should get rid of Lattimore. I'm just saying as far as his contract and his cap number, that's a possibility, not a definite, just a possibility. Okay,
Hmm.
but I still think that Taylor has a good shot of becoming that number 2 guy with Adebo competing for that number 2 guy, but he may be the odd man out or the guy that comes in to play in case someone's injured. Um, I've seen this too. I've seen Taylor talking about putting Taylor in the slot and keeping Adebo outside. I think it's for Adebo, it's going to be a question of do you bounce back and look more like you did your rookie season, or do you still look kind of gun shy like he did some points of 2022? Um,
Yeah.
I think Adebo is the better player on the outside, but I like Taylor's aggressiveness.
Hmm.
I definitely don't want to get rid of either one of them, though. I want to keep them both. I
Absolutely.
think Roby
Yeah.
is the guy who's on the outside looking in right now.
I think Roby's going to make the team just because
Oh,
apparently
yeah, I do
he
too.
lo- yeah, he loves the franchise. He loves being with DA and the team, and I think
Hmm.
he might not get a lot of opportunities to play, but he's gonna be that vet mentor for both those young guns.
Well, he kind of has to be out there because he's the only guy that really can play the inside very well. But you need that veteran guy because, like I said, you need at least four starting cornerbacks out there,
Hmm.
and that's Roby's job right now, to be that fourth starting cornerback. Where safety, you have five safeties that you're going to need. So you're going to have 10 defensive backs out there, and you need to have safeties who can cover, but you also need to have four quality cornerbacks. I think that's your four you got. Um, Kicker, I'm not really that interested in a kicking battle, but I do find it interesting they brought in a kicker and a punter to compete with Gillikin and Will Lutz. I
Yeah.
don't know if they're going to unseat them. I don't expect either one of them to unseat the starters, but I do think it would be good to push those guys because I thought Gillikin was a little inconsistent, and Will Lutz. I mean, he's going to have to show that he can play uh, and kick consistently. Um,
Hmm.
he's missed time and injuries, and when he didn't miss time and injuries, there were times where he looked really shaky. He was good inside of 40, and actually he was good from 50 yards plus, but from 40 to 47 yards, it was a crapshoot a lot of times when he was kicking.
Yeah. I'm worried about him. I know it's been a year plus, but how's that? Is that hip starting to kind of bother him a little bit?
Hmm. It's funny because I've got this is the '88 season. I've got playing
Hmm.
behind it right now. But if you look at Morton Anderson, '87, '88, he struggled a lot too. I mean, we kind of forget about that because of how he started to do in 1990, 91, 92, and even 93. But he had some shaky moments in the mid '80s where he didn't like the Hall of Fame kicker that we got used to seeing out there. Um,
Yeah.
and he got through it, and to me, that's what Will Lutz has to do. Will Lutz has to get through it. He has to show once again, build that confidence that hey, if we get inside of 50 yards, I'm golden. You're going to get it 95, 97, 98% of the time. I'm going to make it from under 50 yards on in.
Yeah.
That's what he needs to be at. He needs to be a kicker he can hit anything inside of 40, outside of 40. He's going to hit 85, 90% of those kicks,
Hmm.
especially indoors. We play mostly indoors. We have very few bad weather games. In fact, we have no bad weather games this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Um,
think 14 of the 17 games are all
mhm.
indoors.
Yeah. So there's no excuse. He should not be struggling making these kicks. He should be very consistent. So I think if anyone is going to have a challenge this year, I think it's going to be Will Lutz. Um, and that's just the secret. So
Yeah.
that's he's got to be motivated to play.
Hmm.
Um, Matt, is there anything you wanted to talk about um, outside of all that we have not covered? I think I've gone through every position on the team with you. Anything that you think that I may have missed or we need to talk about?
Oh, remember that Jay Canner picture that someone did on the mat cover? I want him on my
Yeah.
team forever now.
Yeah, for those who may not have seen this, someone on Twitter made those photo shoots of Jake Hayner where he's, doing this and pointing at the fleur de lis and the whole all that um those
Where he
great
was
pictures from a
imitating
couple weeks ago.
from Zoolander, imitating Derek Zoolander.
Oh yeah, yeah, Zoolander photos. They put that on the cover of Mad or made a Madden like picture, had the logo above it, and it's three pictures of him, and yeah, a lot of people want want him on the team forever since he did those pictures because they think they're hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. Don't take this for what it's worth because it seems like the sports reporters, the Saints beat reporters, all say this because they said this about Ian Book a few years ago. They said this a little bit about Garrett Grayson, not much, but they talk about Jake Hayner being very Breeze like with his passes. He's throwing the ball with a good zip. He is doing a lot of things. When I first saw that, I thought you said the Fall Guy, and I'm like, wait, he wasn't in the Fall Guy. That's Lee Majors. No, no, uh, the new guy. Um, I'm really excited to see Hayner come out and play this preseason because I don't like the Breeze comparisons. Um, I think Hayner's got physical limitations, but I am curious to see does he run the offense well? And if he can show he can run the offense well and make some key passes, he could be a very solid backup, inexpensive backup
Hmm.
on this team for a long, long time. Not making him a starter or anything like that. I just think he could be a quality guy that could really do well on this team, and that's all you really need from a quarterback at this point. When you're drafting a quarterback outside of the first round, you're just hoping to get a great backup. You're not looking for a starter right away. Starter is the surprise, you know. So anyway, uh, anything else? Anything else exciting happening that you wanted to bring up?
Nothing else.
I think this is the end of the ADAD. Okay. Well, thank you guys for sticking with us all this time. Bob should be back next week. I know Bob had a lot of company this weekend, but he should be back next week. We'll have a wrap up of the mini camp. That's a little more like regular camp. It's still stuff you can't, they can't touch each other. It's still shorts and shells, but at least you see the whole team there. Um, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some stuff going on with the Bayou Blitz. Hopefully, we can line up some guests to fill in those dead months between, because once minicamp ends next weekend or next week, there's nothing going on until the end of July. That's a long time. That's 6 shows. We got to figure out what to do. So, and you never want to have Saints news during that part of the season because it's never good news. It's always something bad's happened. That's when the Camara fights happen. That's when that video comes out. That's when Joe Morgan gets pulled over for DWI. That's when, things like that happen. So, but in the meantime, thanks, Matt, for staying up, sticking with us. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Oh, look, Ironhead Hayward, his first touchdown's a Saint. That's from the 89 season. No, 88 season. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Aye.